All right, welcome everyone to the class Elena. This is the ovarian cycle. So let's do this. Ovarian cycle. So how do we take this? The first phase is the follicular phase. Follicular. That's when the follicle is developing. All right, and here then afterwards is the luteal phase. And that's kind of when the ovum is ready to be fertilized, and then right in smack dab in the center is ovulation. And that's at day 14. Okay. Now we know where we're at, so now let's get to the 7 steps of follicle development. So 1, we have primordial. 2, primary. We have secondary. Finally, Graphian. Don't check my spelling because it's a really weird word. 5, corpus. I'll just do corpus hemorrhagicum. Do that. Corpus luteum. And finally, corpus albicans. Okay. So these are kind of the 7 stages of follicle development. Know that these 3 are gonadotropin independent, meaning they're not using FSH or LH at all. So independent. After this stage, when it becomes a mature follicle, mature ovum, that's when it does use FSH and LH. So that's dependent. But starting at the top, when a female is in the womb, when they're about to be born, they have all the primordial follicles that they need for the rest of their life. They're all already made. What primordial follicles are is just a primary oocyte. So that means it's just arrested in prophase 1. And then just a super thin layer of really flat granulosa cells. So 1 layer of granulosa cells. Granulosa cells, those secrete estrogen, which are really important for maintaining and developing the ovum. We'll get to that later as well. So estrogen. The difference between primordial here and primary, not too much. Really, the main difference is still primary oocyte, still in prophase 1. However, the granulosa cells over here have become cuboidal and are proliferating now. So cuboidal and proliferating. And remember, this is all free from FSH and LH. This is just the ovum doing its thing, the oocyte trying to develop. And this is all happening during childhood. This is when the female has been born, when she's just a small little girl. This is all happening as she's developing into puberty. At puberty, that's kind of when the cells become mature Graphian cells, ready to be secreted and ready to have periods, which allow for pregnancy. So, secondary follicle. This is huge. This is when theca cells come into play. Theca cells, they have associated blood vessels and connective tissue. So that's that kind of helps them. That kind of forms a layer of membrane around the ovum. And they also have granulosa cells, of course, but they're now multi-layered. So a lot of Graphian cells, or a lot of granulosa cells, secreting a lot of estrogen. That's really important. But an interesting thing, both of these they secrete what's called antral fluid, which is really crucial for developing the ovum. It has enzymes, anticoagulants, stuff like that helps the ovum develop. Antral fluid. But really, we have just a lot of theca cells and a lot of granulosa cells, and so this follicle is getting thicker, but also getting closer to development. Finally, we cross in here into the mature Graphian cell. So that's just a mature follicle. It's ready for ovulation. And ovulation that usually happens day 14, as we see it here. And remember, we crossed right here into the gonadotropin dependent phase, which dependent on FSH and LH. follicle stimulating hormone that's key for then developing this mature cell until it releases from the follicle and is ready to be fertilized. LH is the actual hormone that allows it to ovulate, to break free of the follicle, be swept up by the fimbriae, and go through the uterine tubes. So that's key. But the Scropian cell is ready. Going on to the corpus hemorrhagicum. This is when the follicle breaks open and allows the secondary oocyte to escape. Secondary meaning it is now arrested in metaphase 2 of meiosis, waiting for it to be fertilized by a sperm cell so that it can finish the cycle and then mitose and grow the zygote. So the corpus hemorrhagicum, the secondary, you can see this, maybe not, the oocyte breaks free. Okay, so that's just what that happens. So what happens to that follicle then? Because we know that that secondary oocyte is swept up by the fimbriae and goes to the uterine tubes in a matter of days, and it's ready to be fertilized. And if it's not, then it's just reabsorbed. But what happens to this corpus hemorrhagicum is it becomes a corpus luteum, which is hugely important. It's also yellow, so let's remember that. This secretes estrogen and progesterone. Oops, spell that wrong. Okay. Secretes estrogen and progesterone. And these two hormones are crucially important for allowing the ovum to continue to develop or stay ready to be fertilized. Because without these two, that's not going to happen. And same thing with the lining and the endometrium. We need estrogen for that, and we need progesterone for that. But so what happens if there is a pregnancy? If there is, then the corpus luteum has to be maintained because we need that estrogen and progesterone. So that's maintained by human chorionic gonadotropin, secreted by the chorion, and necessary to keep this alive until at least the placenta takes over, and then that secretes all the hormones needed. But if pregnancy doesn't happen, if there is no fertilization and the ovum is just left there to do whatever, then we go to the corpus albicans. That corpus luteum becomes corpus albicans, which is more white. ALB, albicans. That's kind of the root of white, if you will. But this corpus albicans then stops secreting hormones, so no hormones, and eventually absorbed. So that actually does leave a scar. So there is some evidence of its existence, but not really. So that's kind of the cycle. And obviously we have an abundance of primordial follicles that are present at birth, and even before that. This is all developing during childhood, and this is at puberty is when this happens. And at that puberty, that's when, and at these phases, that's when follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone come into play, which is the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, if you will. And so those are used to mature the follicle and get ready for ovulation, which is day 14. And then we go through the corpus hemorrhagicum, luteum, and albicans. Albicans if we don't have pregnancy. Once again, if we do, HCG maintains corpus luteum until the placenta takes over. So that is essentially how ovulation works. There's, of course, maybe there's more to it with other processes going on at the same time, especially hormone levels. But that is the basic function. Thank you.